Hi there, Dante Spector here. I'm the scripter and resident cave-dwelling lunatic for the Dwarfins Breedables game in Second Life. And this is the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley.
Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre. I'm here with Joe in 1920s Berlin in Second Life. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
As always, each and every week we are wasting our time in a simulator.
Yep.
In a simulated world, or as Palmer Lucky put it at the Neurogaming conference that happened last week in San Francisco, if we can get perfect VR, we won't have to perfect much else.
Not sure I completely agree, but and I don't think we'll ever get perfect VR, but we'll get close enough.
And then we don't have to ever get off our butts, unless we are forced to use the Vertrix or the Cyberth omnidirectional treadmill. By the way, I got this quote from a commenter on Inara Pace blog, and the commenter Illogical Immersion. Today, not much from me and Joe today, but a lot from some heavy hitters of the Metaverse, of metaversial thinking, because Giulio Prisco, director of the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies, put a list of speakers together under the header Back to the Future of the Metaverse. And this is happening as we tape this intro right here in Second Life. So we shall teleport over in a bit, tape this whole thing and give you the highlights. Of course, in under 61 minutes, since the format of the show is an hour. First, couple of housekeeping notes. Please subscribe to the show on Stitcher. You find the banner on the right. You can get in touch with us. Skype DraxFiles, email radiodraxfiles.com, or send an in-world message to Avatar DraxFiles. Our Leap Motion giveaway continues for one more week. We have 3 correct answers. And if nobody else puts the right name into the hat, and you know what the question is, we said it 2 weeks ago and last week, then I will just chip out these 3 Leap Motions to those 3 people who have the right answer. Joe, you got your Leap Motion, right?
Yep, I received it. It's a fun toy.
Now, before we go to the Metaverse meetup audio, this just in, Joe, your plan worked. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you put out images from 1920s Berlin on Wikimedia, and somebody from the Motley Fool radio program and the Fool.com blog wrote an article which was factually correct about Second Life, and he used nice screenshots.
My screenshots are not the most amazing in the world. I've seen so many more better. But my idea was, if the media has easy access to good, up-to-date screenshots showing Second Life as good as it can look, then they'll use those instead of the 2007 era screenshots that they've been using up to now. So I put some of my screenshots that I also needed for the Wikipedia page anyway, put them on Wiki Commons with no copyrights, public domain, use them for whatever you want, and it worked. I'm quite happy with that, and I hope that some of the even better Second Life photographers are going to add some of their most stunning pictures to Wiki Commons as well.
This is really such a great idea of yours, and it's a no-brainer when you look at it. Guys, if you have snapshots that, and especially the fashion community or other role-playing communities, I mean, there are pictures floating out around there, and journalists are, I don't want to say, well, some of them are outright lazy, but also in defense of journalism, of good journalists, they are always under very tough deadlines. They will Google Second Life, and then screenshots from 2006, 2007 will come up. And if they know they have a reliable source, and Linden Lab puts some up in their Flickr pool, there's a handful of good ones, but there are so many more. And Wikimedia is a great place to put them all. And why not, while you're at it, maybe write a little Wikipedia entry of your role-playing community or whatever else.
That is the idea. Not only has Second Life gotten a bit of good PR because they use nice screenshots, but 1920s Berlin gets a bit of PR, so everybody's happy. If you're a journalist and you want to write about Second Life, what they're going to do, they're going to Google for images and they're going to check if they're copyright free, and then they're going to use the first ones they find. So the more really good up-to-date screenshots but also Linden Lab puts out there clearly usable for everyone without any copyrights, the bigger the chances are that people are going to realize that Second Life is not as ugly as they think it is.
Moving on. Well, it was announced last week that I will be moderating a panel at the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Conference in Mountain View at the Computer Museum this coming Tuesday about the Metaverse. And the panel consists of Ebbe Altberg, Philip Rosedale, Stefano Corazza, and Tony Parisi. Stefano Corazza, for instance, is the CEO of Mixamo, which makes avatars that are portable. Tony Parisi, the co-creator of the VRML standard. So we'll be talking about standards. We'll be talking about governance. We'll be talking about Facebook. Will Facebook eat us all for lunch?
This is very exciting. I mean, not only have you got the head honcho of Second Life, but also the guy behind High Fidelity.
And two other guys who may be concerned that this panel is going to be about Second Life, which it won't.
I hope that it's not just going to be a lot of chit-chat about what's going on at the moment, but there is that, that some of these guys are going to be talked into, and I'm looking at you here, Drax, talked into giving a few secrets away about what's coming and when. You know that everyone's working so hard at about a zillion billion projects behind the screens, and we all want to know something. Come on.
Joe, I appreciate that you want to live in the future. I would tell you to live in the present, which is what I'm trying to do. Of course,
I'm living in the past.
I know. So there's a big conundrum here. But anyway, yeah, we will be talking about the future. And Inara Pay from the Modem World blog has a blog post out there where we are soliciting questions from the fans, or from the enthusiasts, I should say. Please put your questions there, and I'll try to get to them and try to direct them towards the panelists.
There's always people out there who have questions that we couldn't even imagine.
And Joe, we're now going to the core of the show, but I have a sad announcement to make to our listeners, is that Back to the Future of the Metaverse was supposed to be happening in Second Life, and Second Life completely just died on all the participants. There were about 100. Go figure.
Really? Technical issues with communication and chat and lots of groups, people meeting in Second Life?
Well, actually, we're having Skype problems now too. Maybe it's just the internet doesn't want to do it. But anyway,
maybe we should just go and all meet in real life.
No, that's not an option. So we have only time in this show today for Philip Rosedale and for Stephen Larson, who is a co-founder and project coordinator for the Open Worm project. Really interesting stuff. When Second Life crashed, everybody moved to Google Hangouts. If you haven't tried it, try it. It's interesting. It's not the Metaverse. But it kind of works. The entire Google Hangout YouTube video that resulted from the Google Hangout, I should say, is embedded on our blog, so you can get all the presentations. And again, this get-together was put together by Giulio Prisco from the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies. We'll put the link on the blog. It's a techno-progressive think tank. I wonder if that's the opposite of techno-communist. We may want to have a rebuttal of some of the ideas put forward in the next couple of weeks. But for now, here is Philip Rosedale with some of the stuff that you may have heard, but some interesting stuff that you may not have heard in prior shows.
Hey guys, this is Philip. Everybody can hear me okay? I have not used Google Hangouts before, so... Well, thanks for having me. I'll go back to where I was there when we got kicked out of the sim. What I was saying was, I think along with a lot of other people, I share with all of us this renewed enthusiasm around virtual reality. And I was just starting to say inside Second Life there that my co-founders and I, one of whom is one of the early Second Life guys, Ryan, we started doing some experiments with detecting the motion of our heads and putting that motion onto the avatar in a little test environment. And what we were amazed by, and this is very similar to the phenomena that's happening around the Oculus, was that with sufficiently low latency, the ability to sort of project the motion of our bodies in and put them on top of our avatars was something so interesting and amazing and thought-provoking that after looking at it for a couple of weeks, we basically said, well, let's close down our existing company, start a new company called High Fidelity, and start working again on building all of this stuff from starting over, starting with a brand new code base, a brand new team. We're 12 people today. We're in San Francisco, and we're about 1 year into the project of trying to build an entirely new set of services and open source software to enable all of us to create and get into virtual worlds. When you talk about what's happening in the world that is so exciting right now, as opposed to say 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I can put my own spin on that, and I would capture it as sort of two areas. That is, there are two areas where really disruptive work can be done by all of us to take us beyond the current number of people that are able to actively experience virtual worlds, which worldwide is kind of a couple of million people. At this point, we're sort of at the million stage, where a service like Facebook, for example, or the consumer internet broadly is something that's accessible now to billions of people. So we're sort of about 3 orders of magnitude, a factor of 1,000 away from where we all, I think, know this is ultimately going to be. And so the two disruptive technological changes that I think are driving what's happening here are these two categories. One is new interface devices and how we use those new interface devices to access the internet and to basically access the virtual world. The second is the changes that are happening in the speed and capability of computers, and perhaps even more importantly, the network itself, the network of the internet. The changes that are happening there are bringing us into a kind of a magic moment that is going to enable us to be connected to each other in these virtual worlds in a way that we just could never have done inside Second Life, for example, because having started the company in 2000, late 1999, I just didn't have the capabilities that the internet has today. We had Second Life was started and has operated under most of its time kind of these early stages of broadband networking, where we've been able to transmit a few hundred kilobits of data per second over the lines, and we've seen that the delays in sending data from one point to another on the internet are typically on the order of a half a second to a second. That's kind of the internet circa the early 2000s. Now, things have changed today, and again, that's part of why we started High Fidelity. But so those two areas of really disruptive change are the speed and capability of the internet infrastructure itself, one, and then two, profoundly different ways of connecting human beings to the computer, these interface devices. Now, let me talk about that second one, interface devices, because that's where we've done a lot of our really interesting initial work at High Fidelity. Obviously, the Oculus Rift is an incredibly exciting development. It is an immersive display with sufficiently low latency with respect to rendering that you can actually look around in the virtual space and be visually immersed in it in a way that, for those of us who have tried it, and I've tried both the Oculus that we all have, the DK1, and I've also tried the DK2 or maybe DK 2.5 prototype down at the Oculus Irvine offices, and I can tell you that it is a mind-bogglingly good visual immersive experience. But that changed the existence of the Oculus, which is what everybody's gotten so excited about, especially in the wake of Oculus being acquired by Facebook, is only one part of a broader set of interface changes that we're about to all jump into together as designers and as explorers of virtual worlds. In addition to visual immersion, we now have the opportunity to capture the motion of our bodies, our faces, and our hands in a variety of different ways that are in some still in prototype stages today, but all of which are clearly going to come to market in the next couple of years. At High Fidelity, what we've been working with are using 2D and 3D cameras to capture the motion of the head and the facial expressions in a manner, for the motion of the head, similar to what we see with the Oculus. So when I turn my head in front of the computer screen, or when I move it a little bit side to side, we're able to see and detect that information and do things, for example, like changing the 3D rendering to accommodate the fact that I'm looking a little bit to one side or the other, or maybe fly around in the world just based on the fact that I've leaned my head forward a little bit. So we have this ability to basically detect the motion of the head and the facial expressions, my blinking, my smiling, what I'm doing with my face, all pretty easily now from either a 2D or a 3D camera, or, of course, as we've seen from something like the Oculus. In addition to that, though, there's, I think, an almost even more important fact happening, and that is we're going to have a bunch of different ways to detect the movement of our body and our hands, of course, most importantly, our hands. There's a bunch of prototype technologies working on that right now. A couple I'd call out that we've worked with a lot here at High Fidelity are the STEM system by Sixense, which is essentially the new version of what's called the Razer Hydra that many of you have probably seen demos of. The second one is a company called Prio VR, which is working on a very low-cost, consumer cost, inertial body motion controller, and that means a device that can capture the whole skeleton and turn you into the avatar, basically, with very, very low latency. These devices are going to allow us to have 6 degree of freedom controllers. They're going to, or 12 if you count both our hands. They're going to profoundly change the environment because we're going to be able to reach out. We're going to be able to start doing the design work to allow us to actually use our hands and our bodies to manipulate things in the 3D world, not just to communicate, but also to build and interact. And so I think that those technology changes are profound, and we are focusing on building an infrastructure that enables all of these different hardware devices to be used pretty effectively and with very low latency to put you into the avatar and then send that representation of you to the other people that are standing near you in the virtual world. The second area of technological innovation that I think is going to change things is I think really captured by people's use of this word multiverse or metaverse, that we're all saying metaverse because we mean that somehow we're going to have lots of servers connected together. We all know that to create a space that's large and interesting enough to get us all into together, we're going to need to have a lot of machines connected to it. And that's a lot like the revolution that began happening when the Apache web server really got out there and everybody started being able to deploy those things. And then later when Amazon deployed EC2 and we were all suddenly able to deploy these websites, these very sophisticated websites, very easily on a kind of a similar piece of software and then connect them all together with hyperlinks. In a similar fashion, we can't build the metaverse. We can't build really enormous virtual spaces with just a few tens of thousands of machines. Second Life today is about 40,000 machines, and it's one of the biggest, most amazing creations ever, hosted on a huge set of servers. But 40,000 machines is much smaller than the sort of billion or so devices that are connected to the internet today. So what we're thinking about, and what everybody needs to be thinking about, is how do we get virtual worlds deployed onto all these machines, all of our machines, and then connected together. And that's another big piece of what we're working on at High Fidelity. We're thinking about how to give you a piece of software that enables you not just to run your own virtual world, but also to actually share computing resources with people running their own virtual worlds so that we can create, for example, a situation that can dynamically respond to load and allow 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 people to show up in the same place at the same time. And that, of course, is the problem that has caused us to be talking here on Google Hangouts today rather than talking in Second Life, that it looked like we kind of got to 100 or so people there and one thing led to another and, the script stopped working and then ultimately we all got kicked off. And this is due to the fact that unlike a website, virtual worlds have very dynamic bandwidth and computing requirements that are driven by the audience. This is different than a website. Websites handle that scaling much more easily. But in our case, the virtual world, we've got to be able to recruit a bunch more machines, computers, to actually support us, or else an experience like what we're trying to do there can't happen. And so, again, we think we are at a revolutionary moment where we have a sufficient amount of low bandwidth connected computing available on the internet. And as I said, I don't just mean server machines, I mean all our machines. One, and then two, and perhaps more notably with the Oculus acquisition, we have an amazing new set of hardware devices that are going to allow us to immerse ourselves in these worlds. I, for one, believe that Second Life, more than anything, has been challenged in its growth by the simple fact that we've had to use the mouse and the keyboard to access that world. And I think I've heard this said in the precursor email to this meeting, and I heartily agree. I believe that the two dimensions of freedom, the sort of XY motion that we can capture with the mouse, in conjunction with using your other hand perhaps, on the keyboard, is simply an interface paradigm that is too difficult for most people worldwide to be able to quickly jump into virtual worlds. And I think all of the experimentation, a lot of it very good, that's been done in Second Life and competitors to Second Life over the past years have demonstrated that it's extremely difficult to make these virtual worlds any easier to get into without changing the interface paradigm. And so if we suddenly have these devices available in consumer hands that are able to capture, I have one right here, I'll hold it up, I'm sitting in my meeting room, so this is an example of the Razer Hydra, which is a little device that captures my hand motion precisely, 3 degrees of freedom, that's translation there, left to right, up and down, but then also rotation, like we do with the Wii controllers, so I can see all that information. Having that information makes for a profoundly different experience, so we're looking forward to deploying that, but I think for all of us, and I'll say this and wrap up, I think for all of us, these two changes are going to result in the next couple of years being extraordinarily exciting times for virtual worlds, as we're able to sort of do everything that we've done in this sort of first generation of virtual worlds, but now in a very easy to access, fun to play with, easily interconnected kind of a metaphor that will take us hopefully from that, million or so people using virtual worlds up to 1 billion of us using virtual worlds. And I can't wait to see it. I mean, that's all I'm working on. For me, it's been a lifetime expedition to see this come true. And I hope the next couple of years are really powerful times. So let me stop there and thank everybody for having me and hearing me.
And speaking next is David Orban, who is CEO of DotSub and advisor and member of the faculty at the Singularity University, a long-time Second Lifer. Here is David Orban, who substituted as the moderator on the Google Hangout session.
Thank you, Philip. This has been really, really good. And the analogy for me is very, very powerful. A lot of services started out as centralized services and then got distributed. Napster was a centralized file sharing service, and the evolutionary pressure transformed it into BitTorrent, which is seeing all kinds of interesting innovations pop up everywhere. The same way electronic money that was concentrated and centralized was not able to survive, and today we see cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular that is fulfilling a lot of the promise that we attach to electronic money and its applications. So in that sense, what you are saying about the dream of having billions of people participate and collaborate in immersive online worlds in the multiverse and creating it can only be accomplished via peer-to-peer distributed networks. I totally agree with that. Can you elaborate a little bit about the architecture and especially about the fact that today's world sees a variety of devices that are much more radically different and richer than we used to have. Whether it was server computers or client computers, it was the Intel architecture and nothing more or little more. Today we have tablets, we have mobile phones. How is high fidelity going to be thriving in a world where the next billion people participating in the internet will have never even seen a notebook or a desktop computer?
Right. Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that if we're going to have a global scale virtual world, network of virtual worlds, we're going to have to use the simplest possible protocols that can be well described and enable us to talk to each other. If you look at Apache HTTP by comparison, this is a very simple protocol, and that's why we're all able to connect ourselves to it so easily. Internetworked web pages are connected together by just a few very straightforward protocols, and we've built the architecture that we think is roughly correct at this point. You can there on our website at highfidelity.io. In our blog there's a nice overview of our system diagram thus far that I put up a couple of weeks ago now for people to start commenting on. But your reference to BitTorrent, I think, is appropriate. When you look at BitTorrent, you see what is hopefully a fairly simple mechanism for the distribution of basically static assets, and in fact a modest number of static assets accessed by a huge number of people, which is basically sort of the BitTorrent idea, getting a big binary blob out to a lot of people in a peer distributed manner. We're kind of looking at the challenge in a similar light. I guess what I would say of our architecture is we're trying to build the simplest network protocol that would enable live virtual world simulation, physics, and streaming to be distributed amongst a sort of a cloud of peers. I could talk for hours about the actual technical details of that, but we're basically just trying to build something that's very easy. Everybody should be able to sort of write down the commands in the same way we do with something like HTTP, and then walk through them and build their own clients or use our own open source implementations, which are already to some extent up on GitHub. I think that regarding the diversity of devices, one of our targets right now is to build an architecture where the different peers that are connected to each other to create the virtual world can do different things according to what type of device they are. So, for example, we already have working demos today. I'm looking forward to doing a presentation next Monday at the SVVR conference, which is going to be in Mountain View at the Computer History Museum. We're going to there's a conference there which is going to be focused on VR. It should be one of the first really exciting get-togethers of people getting and talking about all this stuff. And we're going to be doing some interesting demonstrations there in a talk that I'm going to be giving. And one of the things that we'll touch on there is the example of running a script written in JavaScript that can execute on like your phone or a tablet or a PC and do something in the world. So, for example, one of the demos we do quite a bit is running an iPhone that is acting as a JavaScript client that is being an avatar. So it's essentially walking around in the world, moving and acting like an avatar, maybe trying to sort of pass the Turing test, if you will. That is a really good example of how you can use a small, relatively lightweight device that doesn't necessarily have a super low latency internet connection, but still use it to do something very useful in the virtual world, which in that case is to actually simulate the behavior of an object, in this case, an NPC avatar. But what we're building is an architecture which allows there to be several different types of machines which are going to be mapped onto several different types of contributed devices. So a server machine that is mixing 3D audio together, for example, which is an example of one of our sort of network nodes, is something that you'd logically run on like a PC at home, because it needs to have very low latency, ideally, to the people that are using it. But something like an iPhone or a tablet running connected over Wi-Fi and plugged in by your bed, charging while you're asleep, can be a bunch of trees or part of the ecosystem or an avatar or maybe even a scripted game or something like that in the virtual world. So we are contemplating a simple architecture that allows network nodes, as we call them, to take on a variety of different roles according to what types of devices they're on.
And now you will hear again the voice of David Orban. It's interesting to note, and we apologize for this, but there's nothing we can do. The Google Hangout voice intermittently was also a little bit bad. So just saying that it's not always SL voice. Here's David Orban.
One of the very inspiring components of Second Life for a lot of us since the beginning was the creativity and the opportunity for economic liberation and the possibility of creating, selling, buying digital commerce in our in-world creations. And in this sense, I see a lot of promise in cryptocurrencies being attached to high fidelity in the possibility of transacting over high fidelity digital goods that are created in world. Also because we have not only the Bitcoin protocol, but we have other currencies that have proof of stake, not only proof of work protocols, basically allowing ownership of digital contracts and the objects attached to these digital contracts. What can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yes, we've been studying and following the cryptocurrency, and as you say, there's this distinction between a currency, a cryptocurrency, and the more generalized concept of the blockchain, which is the generic concept of embodying of allowing a large number of people to agree on a set of statements about the past, which is really the sort of concept of the blockchain that is in the Bitcoin protocol. We are looking at that in a number of different ways. One obvious one, which is almost certainly something we will do, is to use a cryptocurrency or perhaps a sidechain or whatever turns out to be the best way to do this, to be a way of accounting for the contribution in computing power that people using the network are giving to each other. And allowing that in a manner somewhat similar to Bitcoin mining, but I think in a far more utilitarian way, to form a basis for a new common economy around the people that are creating content in the virtual world. If you can be paid in a cryptocurrency for allowing your devices to be used by everybody else to do simulation, this is a very interesting goal and strategy. It allows us to use your computer potentially in a way that has more benefit to society, effectively simulating a virtual world, than simply doing the proof of work that we do with Bitcoin mining. Now, of course, some proof of work is necessary to back the consensus model, basically, as has been broadly discussed in the various explanations of the Bitcoin protocol. But not all of that work need be done solely computing hashes. It can also be used to simulate objects in a virtual world. So we're looking at how we can do that. I would say it's still early to say exactly how we're going to do it, but we are doing a number of internal experiments and building some code around how to connect ourselves to cryptocurrencies. And I think that generally speaking, the idea of the cryptocurrency as a distributed knowledge base for ownership, property, contractual issues, money, is a very powerful idea, and one that I am certain we will see in some form having a big impact on the virtual world. I've got to go in a couple of minutes, so maybe if I can add a couple more things. I've got somebody waiting for me here at my office, but this has been really great.
And now you will hear the voice of Giulio Prisco, the director of the Institute of Ethics and Emerging Technologies, who put this conference together. Here's Giulio.
I think I will take the next question.
Go ahead, Giulio.
And, it's going to be an extremely simple one. And the best introduction is what happened earlier today. We were in Second Life. Everything worked very well until we were like 50 or 60 people on the scene. Then we overloaded the scene. And that's not the first time this happens to me in Second Life. And everyone has similar experiences, not only in Second Life, basically in all virtual worlds that have been developed so far. And one of the reasons why we should be very interested in high fidelity is how the overall distributed architecture of the system can avoid these very common issues. I think you have already answered in part. If you can just say a couple of things to wrap things up.
The practical problem of having more than 50 or so people at an event is a very tactical and very human scale issue. I mean, if you think about the kind of get-together where you've really gotten a lot of value out of, in human scale, in real human experiences, these get-togethers are often kind of on the scale of a couple hundred people. And unfortunately, the scalability of a single network node, the scalability of a single server device is pretty strictly limited to a number that's just on the low side of that meeting size, 40 or 50 people. The reason for this, of course, is that one machine on the internet can only stream so much data to people at once. And if it's live data and it's measured in a couple of megabits per second, then you're talking about 100 megabit or hundreds of megabits per second that machine needs to stream out to everyone. So it's not an issue related to compression or physics simulation or anything else. It's simply the fact that one internet computer can only send data to less than, usually a good deal less than 100 people or so. So what this means is that you must build a dynamic architecture which allows the packets basically to be sort of copied or streamed out to a larger set of people. Generally speaking, the way we do this is using a hierarchy of repeaters or multicast nodes that it's the very idea of multicasting, that are basically kind of taking the data that needs to go out to everybody and kind of copying them. Now, doing that in real time, using drawing machines from a large pool of devices and kind of dynamically allocating them to those assignments, that is exactly what we're working on at High Fidelity. So our goal is that you'd reach that 50-person limit. You might have the whole experience served from your own machine at home, but once you get to 50 people, the system automatically starts recruiting other machines to help you stream that data to the people that are sitting in the audience. And that machine probably charges that network probably charges you something for that, which it essentially shares with the other people who are lending you their machines to do that. Now, the reason that this makes sense is because, as we all know, the virtual world is full of a huge number of different experiences and events and things that are happening in a very unscheduled way. And in fact, it might just be that somebody fun shows up and everybody comes over to, come to the presentation, and boom, the machines are going to go down. And so in that case, we need to this is not just a problem of, allocating enough Amazon EC2 machines to handle your event. If everybody did that and they handled enough machines to, say, accommodate as many as 500 people or something, we'd all be saddled with a a bill, from Amazon, even as inexpensive as Amazon is on these server machines, that wouldn't be something we could bear. So instead, what we need to do is come up with a dynamic way of handling load that can scale up and scale down as the people come and go, and that's exactly what we're working on at High Fidelity. So once again, I got to run to another meeting, but I really appreciate you guys having me, and I'm really glad that we were able to get back together after having Second Life, having that server go down.
And that was Philip Rosedale, who suggested that we should rename the show the Philip Rosedale Radio Hour with Philip Rosedale. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it just worked out that way, that he was the first speaker after Second Life crashed, and we have it on tape. We have limited time to put this together, so here he was. The next speaker is a fascinating subject, Stephen Larson, coming up right now with the Open Worm project, openworm.org. It's an open science project, and he'll talk more about that. If you go to the website, I think there's a Kickstarter for 2 more days, but he'll tell you more about it. It's an NPC worm. It's an AI worm. I don't know what it is. I'm not a technologist, so please listen to him. There is also slides that he showed on the Google Hangout, and those slides are also available. We put the link on our blog. You may want to listen and look at those slides at the same time. It might be confusing. There's also a bunch of YouTube videos that he's referencing in his talk. Here's Stephen Larson.
I really appreciate the invitation to join you guys and get to talk about what I'm doing with OpenWorm. And you'll see there are actually some intersection points between this and virtual worlds and what Philip has been producing. So here, let me I will share my desktop. Okay. So do you see my slides okay here on my screen? By the way, if you're watching this right now, you can follow along with these slides as well. If you go to bit.ly, it's a bit.ly link, and type OpenWorm SL, the letter S and the letter L, for Second Life, all lowercase. So OpenWorm SL. You'll actually get this presentation up in your web browser. Okay, so I'm the project coordinator and co-founder of the OpenWorm project, and we're building the world's first digital organism in an open source manner. So what does that mean? So we combine three basic properties together. We're an open science project. We're also a computational biology and software engineering project with an emphasis on neurobiology in the first phases, but not exclusively on that. And we also combine experimental science from experimental biology. Okay, so that's kind of the 3 major pillars of what we do, and I'll kind of explain those. But before I do, I wanted to show this prototype just to give you a sense of what the heck this means by virtual organism. So I'm just going to hit play on this, and again, if you're at bit.ly/openwormsl, you can see this yourself. But this is a YouTube video that we posted back in December, which got some attention, and what you're seeing here is not an actual worm. This is a simulated worm in 3 dimensions in a physical environment in a code base that we codename Cybernetic, and which has been the product of the last 3 years worth of work. What's happening in this picture is a body in the shape of a worm in 3 dimensions is being pulled on by virtual muscles that are changing color from red to yellow on the sides of the worm there in a 3D environment, and the blue is liquid that's being swept away by the tail, this little thin film of liquid particles that are being swept away by the tail as it undulates. And so this is actually a 3-dimensional scene, and this particular movie doesn't really take advantage of the 3-dimensionality of it, unfortunately, but this is a fully 3-dimensional environment that instead of Second Life interacting, its only purpose is to be a physical environment for this worm. So it's actually banging against the particles of liquid. The muscles are actually pulling on a outside surface, and this is essentially the vehicle that we have been building here for OpenWorm. So that's just just to give you a flavor of what we're doing, and I'm kind of going to explain what this is and why and what's its purpose. Okay. All right, so what's our goal? So our long-term goal is a full-scale simulation of a C. elegans, which is a fancy name for a microscopic roundworm. I'll give you some details on it. But basically, we're building a whole organism from the bottom up, cell by cell. In the medium term, our goal is to predict a database that shows how this particular worm likes to behave with a 3D neuromechanical model. And that neuromechanical model is what you saw a visualization of just now, just before. And so the idea of the medium term is that we're actually comparing what real worms do to what the simulated worm does and making a fit and then iterating and making it even better. Okay, I wanted to say briefly why C. elegans and what is the C. elegans thing anyway. So it turns out that this little worm here was artificially selected. It was chosen by one man, Sidney Brenner, who is still alive today, a scientist who was basically looking around for the perfect organism to do genetics work on, as well as, and there was also an interest in the nervous system. So Sidney Brenner is also the father of all research in C. elegans, because he basically, before him, people didn't do any research on this organism, and the students in his lab went on to have students in their lab, who went on to have students in their lab. So in fact, every scientist who works on C. elegans has a direct sort of scientific lineage back to Sidney Brenner. So we owe him a lot. So this is what it looks like. He's a little worm. He's only 1 millimeter long, which is about the width of a human hair on your head. Okay, so very small. So you can barely see him with the naked eye. You have to look at him in a microscope. And here it kind of looks like this is an X-ray vision, and that's because he's actually transparent. So you can see through his skin, which is a very useful property amongst many others. So what does it do? It seeks out food and mates. It avoids predators and toxins. It even has social behaviors, so they'll group together or not. Fairly complex for such a small organism. It was the first organism to have its genome fully sequenced. It's got a relatively small genome compared to humans. It's got 302 neurons, 95 muscle cells, and 959 total cells in its whole body, 959 total cells. So it's a very small number of cells. And every cell division from the fertilized egg to the adult is known. So they know how each cell comes to be and what path it takes from all the cell divisions. And its connectome, it's the only organism to have its connectome, which is the graph of all the connections of its neurons, of its 302 neurons, completed. And in fact, there's actually been a few different revisions to this, so it's actually still improving, but it is the first that's credited with making that happen. So this plus many other things make the C. elegans the most studied single organism in all of neuroscience relative to its overall size. So sort of in terms of data or papers per like cell count, for example, it's off the charts in terms of how much we know about it. We still don't know everything, still plenty of gaps actually, which I'll walk through, but it's a pretty exciting organism when you think about, trying to make a first digital model and approximation. In fact, that's why we choose it, because it is proportionally so well studied. So we believe it represents a huge opportunity for computational biology. Worldwide, there are about 1,000 different labs that work on C. elegans, but most of them are still biology labs. And it's a dawn of a new era for the computational biology aspects of C. elegans that go towards simulation. So what we do, and kind of to get a little bit of the details of what we are trying to do in OpenWorm, is that we had to pick off a slice to begin with how to model this guy. And so we basically picked a loop between the neurons and the muscles and a body to be the first thing that we chose to simulate, because you have to start somewhere and you can't do everything at once. So for us, there's a particular loop that we care a lot about, which is when neurons get activated that are getting information from the outside world, they activate another layer of neurons inside, which kind of does the calculation, and we call those interneurons. And this is awesome because it's also segmented. This is data that has been published, so you can see the skeletonization of the worm and extract that and do math on it. And in fact, this is a database that I mentioned that we're comparing our simulation to. So there's quite a bit of data that's available, and we're making it as available as possible. And so our goal then is, like I said, to have this comparison where we basically be able to take snapshots of our simulated worm, put it into a classifier that basically tells us how similar or different the simulation is from the real worm data, and then give us a quantification of its behavioral accuracy. And this is our project for this year, after having done a lot of infrastructural work over the last several years. to get that going. So what that lets you do then is to plug in that model of neurons that I just showed you, that we have the connection graph for and the anatomy for, and to the mechanical model that was the first movie that I showed you, combine those together, which is what we're working on now, so that the neurons are actually driving the body, and then that's where we connect that's where these two arrows basically connect, so that we go from activation of neurons plus muscles to changing shape in the body to then coming back to sensory neurons. And closing this loop right now is something that no other sort of neuroscience project can do. This is kind of more of an idea from the AI world of embodied systems or embodied robots. But we think it gets us very exciting when these neurons are actually closer to what real biology does than anything we've seen before in this kind of a simulated environment. So it's very cool. All right. So that's kind of what we're doing methodologically. Let me just say a few words about the software, because I know folks were interested in the prospects of OpenWorm inside Second Life. So let me just kind of go through that real quick. So there's quite a lot of software engineering behind this. Several of our team members have thought quite a lot about how to make this not just a series of hacks, but in fact how to do this properly from a software engineering perspective. And so one of the big challenges here is multi-scale biological modeling. It's represented by this picture here, where you have sort of a nested Russian dolls of contents inside content. So you'd have a neuron, and you'd have maybe things inside that neuron, vesicles, and inside that there are molecules, and inside those are other sub pieces. And so this basic nested dolls thing is something that are all changing over time, and all need to have a way to all fit together. And it's a non-trivial software engineering problem when you really get into the weeds of it. In addition, these things operating at different timescales is another big problem. So there's quite a lot of thought that's gone into the architecture of how to make this happen. And this has been embodied in the OpenWorm project by a simulator that eventually got its own name that we call Geppetto. And you can also click here in the presentation and go see geppetto.org. But basically, the idea of it is to build on top of a foundation of standardized data, a core that then can split different sub-algorithms or subroutines that simulate different aspects of biology into modules that then fit together into a unified simulation layer that can be accessed over the web or over an API layer, and then lets you put other things on top of it. So this is stacked on top of OSGI for any of the Java nerds that are out there, and reuses a whole lot of open source technology that I don't really have time to go over, but a lot of this is listed here on geppetto.org, and in fact it's starting to take on a life of its own. Other folks are starting to work on Geppetto even independently of the OpenWorm project. So that's up online, and there's actually several groups that are working on it, again, which I don't have time to go into, but check it out on the site. Okay, so the extension of Geppetto to specifically having the worm simulation in it, because a lot of what we've been doing is setting the stage architecturally, is something that we've been calling WormSim. And this is my opportunity to plug the Kickstarter, and thanks very much to Julio for promoting it on the site for this talk. So we are doing a Kickstarter right now. You can get to it from this link here, bit.ly/kickstartworm. This one is case sensitive, so it's capital K, capital W. And basically, WormSim is Geppetto plus that model that I just showed you, at the very beginning of the crawling worm. The reason that these didn't start out as the same code base is because we've had a division of labor within the project, and so in fact the thing that's called cybernetic is a C++ code. It's also open source, and it will continue to be open source, as all of this will be. But folks have trouble installing it and working with it, and so the idea of Geppetto is that everything is available to the web. And so our Kickstarter is really to combine the moving worm with the web application, Geppetto, so cybernetic plus Geppetto, plus some additional tutorial information around it, and give that out to everybody, in addition to several other rewards. So WormSim is Geppetto plus cybernetic. It has several features. So it combines cybernetic with a browser interface. It lets you drill down into individual cell activity, so you can see not only a static picture of the worm, but it moving. It has a web console for folks that want to code around a little bit that is Java based. You can see animations, and you can see the cells light up as well. There's documentation, and there's also live help. So It's the last 3 days of our Kickstarter project, actually. So, and any help would be greatly appreciated. And if you pledge high enough, you actually get in as an early backer, and you get exclusive access to WormSim in the first year. Okay, but Second Life. So folks have said, what would it be? What would it take to put the worm into Second Life? And the nice thing about Geppetto, because it currently targets a web client, is that there is a protocol that's been worked out, currently going over WebSockets, that push the results of the simulation to this very thin WebGL-based client. And so I think there's nothing stopping folks from taking that WebSockets protocol and trying to engineer something that listens to it in Second Life. So essentially, it would be a WormSim client or a Geppetto client that operates purely in Second Life. Let me show you a little bit about some thoughts about how that works. So today, the visualization of the worm is a particle-based system. So this here is a slice through the worm, right? So if you imagine a tube and we just cut a piece of it and we look end on, it becomes a circle. And on the outside here are its muscles in dark green, muscle, in 4 quadrants around the outside. And this is sort of the inner guts of the worm. So what cybernetic does is now we look at this as sort of a cylinder that we take off the side. And again, these green here are the muscles. This is actually composed of a lattice structure that allows the particles to move with respect to each other, but also have constraints and relationships. So some of the relationships within the muscles are elastic connections that pull on each other like real muscles do. And others are passive, but are still elastic, so they kind of bend and squish and that kind of thing. And there are others that are just liquid. So inside the center of the worm body currently is just sort of a fluid that exerts hydrostatic pressure on the outside. So one way to implement a WormSim client would be to stream all the positions of all these particles from the back end to the front end, and then have a graphical representation of this content within Second Life that then interacts with other sims. Another thing that's being explored right now, under the design of WormSim, is to not stream all the particles, but to stream just the outside. So basically, just stream a mesh and just points that are kind of on the outside, and that is in fact something that we're looking at that might be more computationally tractable. The other piece of this is that folks often ask, how is it possible that it can be interactive? It seems like there's a lot of work to make the simulation happen at the same time scale of the environment. So currently what we've been implementing is a replay mechanism so that the simulation could take maybe hours to calculate, but the outputs of it could be run as sort of a 3-dimensional movie. I'd say a movie, but not a static movie, a movie that actually has all of the data components inside of it. And that's also being built in as part of the protocol between the back-end WormSim and the front end.
So that was Stephen Larson, co-founder and project coordinator for the Open Worm project. I hope you guys got a lot out of this talk. Check out the website and his slides and the videos. It's really fascinating. There's not so much we can do here on audio only. A lot of people that we didn't get to, fascinating, the Reverend Christopher Bennick, who wrote a paper on religion in virtual worlds, and also Kanea Sunsu, a Second Life artist who had her name legally changed to her avatar, something I've been contemplating for 7 years now. But the entire Google Hangout session is now on YouTube. You can watch it anytime. And we linked to it on the blog. It's probably important to also mention again that all the folks that were scheduled to speak today in Second Life are of the trans-humanist persuasion. And Ben Goertzel, who I was looking forward to, is from an organization called Humanity Plus. Needless to say that we are trying to schedule these folks to talk to us about AI and how they envision the future, not only of the metaverse, but also of continuous life and sort of the melding of humans and machines. The discussion about what the future of the metaverse is will be, or should be rather, picked up on Tuesday at the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Conference. I will be moderating the panel, as I said earlier, with Ebbe, Philip, Tony Parisi, and Stefano Corazza. So if you're there, please approach me. Let's shake real-life hands. And if you're planning to go, you can put in Drax 2014 code at the svvr.com to get $100 off admission. All right, Joe, this is the end of the show. What are you up to this weekend?
Well, this weekend I'm going to try out some of the new avatars. Linden Lab has just announced that there will be 24 brand new starter avatars. They're all, most of them are mesh, and this is something new users will get to try, and we old users can give them a go as well.
So does that mean you're going to sign up 24 new alts?
No, if I'm not mistaken, they are all in the library, in your inventory, and you can try them out.
Very cool. And we talked about this last week, that there is an issue around facial animations. There's so many HUDs available with facial animations that make things, so much more lively. Also the lip sync, not the lip syncing, but the triggering through SL voice, the trigger that makes the lips at least move a little bit. Apparently that would not work with these avatars.
That's just one of many issues. As most of us know, using a mesh avatar can be quite tricky and complicated, especially if you want to try mesh clothes and you have to combine things. It's not as easy as regular avatars, and this is something that we are adding on top of the already steep learning curve for new users. So I think that this is pretty much like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. One of the biggest problems Second Life has is retention, and we want to make things for new users easier, better, and not more difficult, and give them even more hurdles. I mean, imagine if you are new to Second Life and you've got one of these avatars. The first thing you notice is that everyone on the island where you start has the same avatar as you. How are you going to change it? There is so little you can change about a mesh avatar. And if someone says, oh, here, you're new, here are a few clothes. What if they don't fit? What if they're the old-fashioned kind of clothes? What if they're not fitted mesh? I mean, you're going to be so confused.
Well, listeners, give us a call on the Skype line, leave a message, Drax Files. Tell us, what do you think? Is there more confusion or is there less confusion now for noobs? I'm going to get a tiny avatar because I'm going to the tiny art walk at Raglanshire. The art walk did start on May 4th, but it will run until the 25th. The Raglanshire is, of course, the domain of the tinies. There are dances. There's DJ Bloodfang, by the way. He's spinning some tunes. And if you don't know who DJ Bloodfang is, you have to watch my videos, because he's the Hitchcock of the Drax File series in cuddly bear form. He's in all of them. If you find him in all the videos, I'll give you a prize.
Even in Berlin?
Right. No. In the Berlin episode, he's not in there.
He didn't get past the police, did he?
Yeah, he's probably still in jail. Another note, the Unia campaign from Mad P Games. Now, Mad P, as you may know, has been producing really cutting-edge immersive adventure games, and they're upping the ante once more with a game called Unia, which should be out, I don't want to make any predictions, I think in late summer, so they're still working on it. And this thing is massive. I have watched it progress. I'm going to do the trailer for this game. This development has been going on for a very long time, and they're raising money to keep the development going and the upkeep of the Sims. They had Sims that generated income in various ways, but these Sims were basically off limits while they were developing it. So they're looking for $4,398, and they're over halfway there.
The great thing about the projects Matt P works on is that they're so different and unique and interesting that this is the kind of stuff that we need to share with the outside world, because it goes against the bad reputation Second Life has.
It goes against the reputation that Second Life is a place sort of for amateurs, and stuff looks bad, I think, too. And in terms of interactivity, what they're doing is just absolutely cutting edge. This needs to be up front and center. I think Linden Lab should promote this as well.
Oh, I agree. It would be great to use the screenshots and the video and things like that. Maybe Linden Lab should send one of their photographers, make lovely screenshots and put them in Wiki Commons.
There you go. Wiki Commons, Wikimedia. Go there and post your stuff and tag it so the journalists don't have to get off their butts. Anyway, so this is the show today. I'll hope you come out to the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Conference and maybe shake my hand in real life if you listen to this, if you can come, if you live in the area. And if you want to do some reporting, I mean, I'm going to be there. I'm going to record a lot of conversations, hopefully. But if you're there too, and if you have tape, if you have statements and interviews that you want to submit to this podcast.
It doesn't have to be on tape, Drax.
Well, we're on the radio.
Yeah, but people have got modern technology these days to record it as well.
Says who? Says who?
Hey, I read newspapers,
Oh, they still have newspapers in Europe. That's interesting. Anyway, Joe, I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Leap Motion, SL Go by On Live, Stitcher, Bot Girls Identity Circus, Carvel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Escapades, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Nantra, Angel Red Couture, Fallen Gods Incorporated, What's Next, Avacon, and Landscapes Unlimited. Special thanks to Dante Spector for providing the station ID this week. Contact the show via Skype Drax Files, Avatar Drax Files, or email radio@draxfiles.com.